This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And we have a telephone listen line. If you'd like to dial and take us with you as you travel or listen, wherever you are, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. That's the listen line. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Lark in Texas is with us. Welcome, Lark.
Morning, Vince. How are you?
Hey, good morning. It's great to hear your voice. Lark, the last time I saw you was at the farm here, and we had a group of instructors, and I said to the instructors, there were a bunch of us here, and I said, okay, there's the refrigerator, bathroom's over there, sofa beds are all over here, and so, just help yourself, make yourself at home. And the next morning, John Statmiller was here, Aaron Dakins, Brad Dakins, Rich Sheben. There were a bunch of us here.
Rick Miller.
And, Rick Miller, Matt Stein. I think Ed Marvini was here, too. And next thing I know, the next morning, we had a chef cooking a fabulous breakfast for all of us. That was you. So it was really neat. It was really neat to see how the instructors just step up and take care of, whatever's necessary, without being asked. And that's kind of who we are. And I really appreciate that. And I think about that often, Lark. I really do. Lark, we've got a full schedule today. We're going to be talking about a very important subject, but we've got Guineith. Guineith in Australia. She called and she's got a report that she wants to share with us, and I know you're going to have a comment about this. Guineith, welcome.
Hello, how are you all this morning?
Guineith, Lark in Texas is with us. He's an instructor, and he's really very interesting. And I know he's going to be interested in what you have to say. Please share that with us. Okay.
Right, now, I had a parent-teacher interview with my two sons' teachers. You could just about smell the child protection people in the background because, something, there's one of these memes out there on the internet, those little posters that people put on Facebook. And I say, it's absurd to say that the dog and the farmer are not working together. So when you go to annoying the local corrupt police chief and his minion goons, then you can expect them all to start coming out of the woodwork and going after you. But anyway, one thing they did say was, we are going to hire a medical doctor at the school, and the children will be able to go and see this medical doctor without their parents' knowledge or consent. And I just sat there and I listened and I smiled and I, took it all in of what they were saying. And I went home and I said, right, I'm going to write a letter now. Because do you know something? That is a liability hole that you could drive a freight train through. Mm-hmm. If you go, you know, let's have a scenario, for instance. School hires teacher. School doesn't know that teacher is in fact a pedophile who has a venereal disease, which very many pedophiles do. So the children start to get sick. The children go and see the school doctor. The school doctor does all the blood tests, and the school doctor starts diagnosing child after child after child with syphilis. Oh man, oh man, oh man. How long do you think it's going to take him to realize that they have a problem?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what I've done. We had a son who wanted to try the public training camp, public school.
Yeah.
And
that's basically where my sons are there.
Yeah, he was homeschooled until freshman year of high school, and he decided he wanted to try it. Then the school decided they were going to have drug testing, and they invited Mrs. Finelli and me to be on the drug testing committee, which was a bad thing for them to do because we were against drug testing. We wanted drug education, but we didn't want this random drug testing because where does the DNA go and all that? And I finally said to them, if you think you're going to test our son, who is a minor, without his parents being present, you're mistaken. So every time they wanted to have a drug test with our son, they had to call us. And we said, we'll be there within a half an hour. But you'll have to wait because you will not have any interaction with our son who's a minor without us being present. We are his parents, and we will be there. That's how we handled it. And you know what? They did it. And then we advocated all the parents get involved. And the school said, you know what? We can't do that. We can't do that because if we do that, some of these parents are drug addicts, and they will take the necessary steps to prevent the drug testing from working. And I said, that's not our problem. So that's how we handled it. Lark, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, well, I handled it pretty well in a similar way. I was saying, because what I found out that they were doing was they were calling my younger son aside, and they were asking him a bunch of questions without my knowledge or consent. And then after the fact, they were sort of mentioning it to me as if it was no big deal. And I said to myself, well, I'll have to write and say that it is in fact a big deal if you question my son without my knowledge or consent. Because not even the police are allowed to do that. There has to be a child psychologist who is independent, who does not work for the police. There has to be the child's lawyer. There has to be either the parents there or a solicitor for the parents. All have to be there when a minor is being interviewed by the police, and you know that is in fact the truth. And there's no way that the school could do it to any lesser standard and not have a massive liability hole. And I, for one, would absolutely put in such a big damages claim it would probably close the school.
Very good. Lark, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have a few thoughts. Number one, of course, as you already might expect, we live in a communitarian system today, and this is worldwide. As far as drug testing is concerned, or drug education, I should say, is concerned, sure, I advocate that children learn about drugs, but then they should learn about all drugs, not just the so-called illicit drugs, even the legal drugs. And then I would perhaps suggest that sometimes poor food choices can act just like drugs in our body. But what you're confronted with, ma'am, is a communitarian school system. And what we see as Common Core educational standards, this is also known as outcomes-based education. It's also known as guided psychological growth. It's known as P20, which is preschool all the way through graduate school education, but it extends today into the workplace. So it's basically a modern variant of socialism, cradle
I
to
was
grave.
going to say, would that be communist education?
Well, it's heavily influenced by the cultural Marxists, there's no doubt,
Yeah.
and people like John Dewey and the Frankfurt School, et cetera, et cetera. But today it's a mistake to call it communism, because when you call it communism, what it does is in the average person's mind, it absolves them.
Doesn't know what communism is.
If they say that, well, gee, I'm not a communist.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to look at our a system of governance or scientific management, also known as a scientific dictatorship of the community, so-called global to local. This is a system of communitarianism, and it's undergirded by so-called communitarian law, which is the same law that they have in the EU, because that's the global model.
Which is run by the East Germans, who were communists, and Angela Merkel. There's another thing out there on the internet, that a rumor on the internet that Angela Merkel is actually Adolf Hitler's daughter, that I came across, which I thought was very interesting.
Striking similarities in facial features, etc.
There's actually a photo. There's actually a photo on my Facebook page that I put up there, which actually shows the remarkable genetic similarities between Hillary Clinton and both Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler. So if you want to go to my Facebook page and check that one out, that's very interesting. And it's not entirely a joke.
We cannot discount the influence of the Fabians, though. In fact, I often tell people that the two best video tutorials, they're very short, on YouTube that anyone can watch to be introduced to the topic, is to go on YouTube and then type in the Fabian Society, communitarianism, and the New World Order, and then follow that up with John Maynard Keynes and economic fascism.
Yep, I would absolutely agree with you there, because come to think of it, their behaviour the other day was absolutely Fabian. It was serpentine.
We're going into a break. I'll see you on Tuesday. Gwyneth's going to be joining us on Tuesday. Thank you very much for calling in. Lark in Texas is with us, and he's written 2 fabulous articles on communitarianism, and they are at republicbroadcasting.org. And I've linked to them at usaprepares.com, page number 1. So if you go to usaprepares.com, page 1, you'll see the post that says communitarianism, first things first, Lark in Texas, and there are links for 2 articles. And Lark, would you like to share with us what we're talking about, what communitarianism is?
Well, communitarianism is a scientific dictatorship of the community. But the word community does not mean what you think it means. And this is the insidiousness of a communitarian form of governance, because man is oftentimes ruled by emotions and by his or her thinking, the thoughts which enter into their heads. And those modes of thinking, those emotions, rule over our actions, and they govern our activities. Capitalism would be the thesis, and versus or juxtaposed in conflict with that would be the antithesis, which is communism. Capitalism versus communism equals communitarianism, which is the synthesis. So you have a collision of these 2 ways of life, philosophical outlooks, worldviews, and that follows the model of the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So you cannot say that communitarianism is entirely communism. What does that do in the average person's mind? Well, people on the right would say, well, I'm not communist. That can't possibly be me. Communitarianism must be one of these fancy, newfangled words for what used to be called communism. But a person on the left will look at that word, and if they learn anything about it, they're going to suggest that it's actually fascism, because it's corporatism. Remember what Mussolini said during World War II. Fascism is more properly termed corporatism. And what we have today is a melding or merging together, a convergence, if you will, of the Soviet systems, the Chinese systems, the European systems, the European Commonwealth nation systems, into one new system, which is called an all-encompassing school of thought known as communitarianism. The type of law which is practiced in our courts today at every level is communitarian law. The type of law which is practiced at the International Court of Justice at The Hague is communitarian law. In Europe, it's known euphemistically as community law, but it's also known as community acquis. And that's because they take the words communitarian law from the French. And the French is acquis communautaire, which simply translates into English as communitarian law. And this is the facts, this is the reality, and this has been rolled out on a worldwide basis from the early to the mid-90s, right about the time of the popularization of the personal computer. Because we are now in the information age at a time of instant communication. And this was all set in place before the popularization of the personal computer. And by that I mean to say, when your average man or woman or child on the street could afford a personal computer in their home. And now with these smart devices, smart meters, and smart technology, it's upon us.
I was thinking about that a couple of days ago when I was traveling in a vehicle. I was thinking the early days of Bill Gates and how we thought that this was going to be just wonderful for us because we could have spell checking and word processing. And here we are with this new form of control. We'll be right back with Lark in Texas. Lark in Texas is with us. Lark, one of the things I've noticed is words seem to have changing meanings. Not to me necessarily, but it seems like the media keeps changing the meaning of words, and they use words over and over and over again, and they're conditioning us. And one of those words is community, that word. Another word is kid, K-I-D. So during the break, I looked up the definition of kid. So I typed in kid, K-I-D, comma, definition. And here's what it says. Number one, a child or a young person. Child, youngster, little one, baby, toddler, infant, boy, girl, young person, minor, juvenile, adolescent, teenager, youth. Or, the second definition, a young goat. That is what a kid is. A kid is a young goat. But we've been conditioned to call our children kids. When I was growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s, parents referred to their children as a child or children. They didn't refer to them as goats.
Well, there's an interesting word that came to mind as we were talking before the break. And the word is menticide, which is spelled M-E-N-T-I-C-I-D-E. It's also called mind control, brainwashing, re-education, brain sweeping, coercive persuasion, thought control, or thought reform. And of course, it's a scientific theory, but for example, there's a man named Just Mirlou who wrote a book in 1956 entitled The Rape of the Mind, The Psychology of Thought Control, Menticide, and Brainwashing. And when I mentioned previously this thing called guided psychological growth, that's actually a Russian word that was used during the time of the former Soviet Union and soon after the Bolshevik Revolution, beginning of the 20th century. And that Russian word is obushiny, and it's spelled O-B as in boy, U-C-H-E-N as in Nancy, I-E, guided psychological growth. But these ways of mind control and education were built upon and expanded upon greatly by people living during the time of Stalin. And of course, that preceded the so-called National Socialists of World War II Germany. But regarding Guineith, if she's still listening, I might recommend for anybody that has children in school, even children in university and recently out of university within the last 10 years or so, a website called InvisibleSurfsCollar.com. Invisible Surfs Collar, S-E-R-F-S, collar as in a shirt or a dress. Now, this is a website by Robin Eubanks, who's a former securities attorney, married to a software developer living in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's very interested in education policy because, of course, she has 3 children, some of, at least one of which I think is now an adult or close to being adult. And interestingly enough, she has an article about this thing called menticide at her website. And it's entitled Menticide, deliberate targeting of our frame of orientation for examination and then assault via education. And it was Robin who introduced me to this word, obushiny. But if you really care about education in this day and age, I would highly recommend InvisibleSurfsCollar.com, because the cool thing about Robin is you can actually speak to her, and she will, in an intelligent manner, comment or respond to your comments at her blog. And this doesn't matter anywhere in the world. If you can speak English, then you can learn about education. And if you're a parent today, you really need to learn about education. And even if you're just anybody, an adult, and have no children, we need to learn about this word, because it's the one word that you never hear spoken aloud. You seldom, if ever, see it in print, that you don't know about, but that you really do need to know about, and largely because of its direct connection to so-called communitarian law. If you go on Wikipedia and type in community acquis, A-C-Q-I-S, you'll get a redirect to acquis communautaire, and you'll see it. We used to have a contract clause. It was called the Supremacy of Communitarian Law Contract Clause. So if you have a company in, say, Germany or Italy or England or France doing business with a company in Canada or the U.S. that is also fulfilling contracts, because they also have contracts with companies in China or Russia or India, then if you have a contractual dispute under which type of a law would you adjudicate such a dispute? And this was the justification provided for rolling out this system of one world law. You can't have a new world order and a one world government or system of governance, that's your management, without a law in which you can adjudicate contractual disputes. And there's your evidence in a nutshell for why this word is so important to know about in 2016 as we usher in 2017.
Lark, when back in the 90s, when I was a teacher at a public training camp, we had something called outcome-based education, as you mentioned, and it was new. And the teachers were told, I'm talking about high school teachers, elementary school teachers, public school teachers, they were told that there were standards to which they would teach, and they were statewide. And the standards, so each county could not decide what it was going to teach anymore. There were standards that were statewide. And the statewide standards were very similar to the federal standards. And the teachers were told that they would be measured, their performance would be measured based on how well their students did. And that measurement was the test. So the standardized test was administered to the students. The teachers had to teach the material so that the students could take the test and pass the test. And if enough students didn't pass the test, the teachers got fired. So the teachers were under threat of losing their job or jobs based on how well their students did. So what they did was they taught the teachers figured out, here's a workaround. We'll just teach the students what the answers to the test are. So the students would memorize the answers to the test. And that's how they accomplished teaching what they wanted our children to learn. And I believe that's part of what you're talking about.
What they've effectively done is they've dumbed the curriculum down. And, I mean, you can watch a documentary on YouTube. It's called UNESCO and the Deliberate Dumbing Down of the Western World. What's happened is that even if your child or a student is in public or private school today, they have to teach to these so-called standardized tests. And success is described as when you have a high percentage of people or students who pass the test. So nowadays, it doesn't matter if it's public or private school. You have to teach the test because you have to provide the education that the communitarians want provided. And a lot of educators are unwitting dupes and useful idiots to this cause. Yes, a lot of educators have complained, but how many soldiers going to war have complained? How many people in corporations have complained? You see, the entire system is socialist. And when you understand the preferred business model for all socialist organization is, in fact, the corporation, then what you see with your modern corporation today, small, medium, or large, multinational, is frankly socialism in microcosm.
Lark,
So do you see why it's dangerous to say that communitarianism is strictly a new word for communism?
Lark, many years ago when our son was in high school, I was extremely disappointed with the quality, actually the lack of quality of education in this public training camp. And I decided to run for school board office. And as someone who was running for this position who would direct how the school would function, I decided I'd learn as much as I could. So I would just show up at the school. I would just show up and say, I'm here. I'm running for school board office. I'm Vincent Finelli. And I'm here to walk around and learn, to help you. My intent is to help the school system. And I would sit in the lunchroom and I would walk into classrooms, and I was free to go wherever I wanted to go. And after the school day, I met with the teachers and I listened to them. And they complained. They complained to each other. They complained about all of this reporting that they had to do. When we come back, I'll tell you a little bit about it, and I'd love to hear your comment. Lark in Texas is with us, and we'll get his website in just a minute. Class Lark in Texas is with us. Lark, how do we get to your website? Learn more about you.
Lark in Texas, larkintexas.blogspot.com. It's a static, Vincent. I haven't posted anything in there for 3 years. I'm going to leave it as a standalone work. Mm-hmm. And sometime in the new year, I'm going to work on a documentary and try to get that out to folks. And otherwise, I just speak out about it whenever I have an opportunity, because I remain astonished after speaking out for 6 or 7 years now, how little it's being discussed, even within alternative media. It's quite astonishing.
Mm-hmm. It is, and I used to think there were 5% of us, then I thought there were 3% of us, then I thought there were 1% of us. Now I think it's 1/10 of 1%. So, Lark, when I ran for school board office in our little hamlet here in the county, I met with students, and I went to the cafeteria, and I went to the library after school hours ended, and I talked with the teachers, and they're all sitting in the library, and they're kind of complaining, and they had their heads down doing work, complaining to each other. And I said, "So, what are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we're working on these reports." And I said, "What reports?" And they said, "These federal and state reports." And I said, "How much time does that take?" And they said, hours and hours. And I said, "Well, let's just not do them." They looked at me like I was crazy. I said, "No, just forget it. No, we won't do that. We're going to get back to teaching. If I'm elected, we're going to get back to teaching. We're going to throw all this government mandates overboard. We're just not going to do it." And they thought I was nuts. And so I put an ad in the paper, and the ad said this: "Fire the entire school board. One director at a time. Consider voting for Vincent Finelli, the only candidate who won't make your child urinate in a cup." And I ended up with 1/8 of the votes. But the existing administration was so afraid of me, the superintendent was so afraid of me, that she rallied the support of everybody she could to vote for the incumbent. The incumbent was a convicted felon. And when I called the school board group to find out, the Missouri School Board Authority, to find out what the requirements were for running for school board office, they said, "Well, you have to be 24 years old and live in at least 24 and live in the county that you're running for school board." And I said, "Well, I can do that. That's good." And I said, "So that's it?" And they said, "That's it." And I said, "All right, so it doesn't matter that I'm a convicted felon?" And they said, "You're a convicted felon?" And I said, No, but if I were, it wouldn't matter, would it?" And they said, "Well, no." Well, I just looked up the requirements, and they changed them, revised November of 2015. And it says, in addition, school board, candidates for school board must have filed disclosure. They must be current on their state income taxes, personal property taxes, municipal taxes, and property taxes on their residents. And they must be free from certain criminal convictions as described in more detail below. So they've decided that maybe by me asking this question about me being a felon, which I wasn't, that maybe they should tighten down who is going to run the schools. Interesting. But they are still mired in paperwork, so that the teachers are so mired in paperwork that they can't spend time teaching. It's an outrage.
Well, unfortunately, public education in this country was founded by an avowed socialist horseman. And it's just too bad that your average American, for instance, doesn't even know this. The new education secretary is Betsy DeVos. Richard DeVos, Amway, wealthy billionaires from Michigan. So this is how education is going to turn.
Very, very sad, and we are getting dumber by the second. And so I pulled our child out of that school, and I said, son, you're getting dumber by the second. We got to get you out of there. And we did. Lark in Texas, thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you soon and having you back again and again and again. Thank you so much for raising. Thank you for raising the bar. Class will be right back. We'll be talking with Kurt Wilson about insulation and do-it-yourself projects and how to store fuel. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Kurt Wilson. And his website is armchairsurvivalist.com. And he's a broadcaster. He broadcasts from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the internet, AM, FM, shortwave, and satellite. Kurt Wilson's a USA Prepares instructor. Welcome, Kurt.
How you doing, Vince?
I'm really well. You know, I was thinking as the intro to this hour started up about our electric utility company and our cooperative, and I was thinking about our topic today, insulation. And as you know, Kurt Wilson, I'm a farmer, and I raise black Angus cows. I've got some red Angus cows as well, but Angus cows. And so we when we first moved here and set up a shop, if you will, we built this house and insulated it very, very well. We used closed cell foam and we used some fiberglass in addition to the closed cell foam, and our electric bill was typically less than $100 per month. And the next thing I knew, the utility trucks were on our farm opening up those green underground junction boxes that connect the underground power cables, because all of our utilities at this farm run from the road, then they go underground for about 1,300 feet on our farm. And so the trucks were here, and these guys are opening these up, and they're looking at the wiring, and they're scratching their heads, and they're trying to figure out how we operate our farm, do all the stuff we do, and our electric bill is less than $100 a month. So, so I said, hey guys, how's it going? And this was years ago. And hey, Mr. Finelli, so what are you doing? Just making sure that all these boxes are plumb and level, and, there's a little settling going on. And we're just making sure that everything's wired correctly. Junctions are tight.
Yeah, and they're making sure that you're not bootlegging anything.
Really, you're absolutely right. What they were looking for is some siphoning off of some electricity, and that's what it was all about. And so it was so unusual for an operation of ours, our size, not that we're large, but of our size operation, to use so little of their electricity. And so they really thought that we were helping ourselves to some free electricity, which they found we weren't. And so the point of that is, when we built this house and set up shop, we looked at efficiencies every way we could. And it was so unusual in our neck of the woods that they sent out some trucks to investigate. We didn't call them. They figured it out. They said something's really wrong, because we're using about 1/4 the amount of electricity that others that do what we do are using. And that's kind of one of the topics of today, and that is insulation. And how do we improve or how do we save money? Because as John Statmiller told me the last time I talked to him on the phone, which was a few days ago, he indicated that I'm really frugal. And I said, you're right. I absolutely am frugal. I don't like wasting anything. I said my parents were raised in the Depression, and there wasn't much, and they had to make everything last a long time, and they had to be interested in quality and taking care of what they did have, and they had to grow their own food to supplement what they bought at the store, and that's just the way it was, and that's kind of how I was raised, and I think that you come from the same point of view, that you are frugal and you don't waste anything. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. And it astounds some people. I live on yard sales. As soon as in North Idaho, we have 2 seasons. We have winter and construction. So as soon as construction starts, people start having yard sales. So we go to them, my son and I, and I find things. I don't know, maybe I have the ability to see the future, but I go to this yard sale, and this guy has 4 doorbells. These are, the normal ones with the transformer and the button and the actual doorbell inside the house, and he wants $5 for all 4 of them. They're $20 a piece at Home Depot. So I go, what the hell? Someday one of them's going to go out. So I buy it and I put it in my special shed. Mm-hmm. And this is for the stuff that someday I'll use. Sure enough, 10 years later, my doorbell went out, and I had a spare doorbell. But my best investment at a yard sale was when we first moved here in '99. I went to a yard sale and at a big farm, and there were 5 bales of blow-in insulation. Mm-hmm. Now these are $20 a piece at Lowe's. I mean, these things are 100 pounds each. Mm-hmm. And he wanted. Started off with $50, and I said, no, I could probably use that, but nah, not good enough. So he followed me around. Like, if you ever been to Tijuana, the vendors follow you around, and first they start off with $10, and by the time they're done, they say $1.50. Mm-hmm. So as I'm leaving, he goes, look, $5, take them all. I couldn't pass it up.
Sure.
Because I just bought a house that was made in 1971. In the attic, the insulation was 1 inch thick. That's it. It was just enough for color. So I gave him $5 for these bales, and I went to Home Depot, told them I wanted to rent their unit, and they said, where'd you buy the bales? I said, a yard sale, but they got your label on them. He goes, oh, well, in that case, you can use this free. So my son and I spent the next 4 hours blowing in about a total of 12 inches of insulation into the attic, which I picked up for $5. And while I'm up there, it's cold because I'm noticing that there's openings in the siding where the siding connects down, lays over the lower piece of siding, and there's lines. You can see air coming through that. So I'm thinking, it's not a good idea to have a house that is this poorly insulated, not just in the attic, but everywhere else. So what I did was I went to Harbor Freight, and I found a little electronic gizmo. It's a laser thermometer. It cost, well, when I bought it, it was $50. Now you can buy them in Harbor Freight for $10. It's the size of a keychain fob. You point it at something, push the button, and it tells you what that temperature is. Okay? So what I did was, now I did this part further into the season once winter started. I had the heaters on in the house. I went outside, and I have a notepad with me, and I'm pointing this thing at all different parts of my house. Now it's basically 45 degrees outside, and it's probably about 65 degrees in the house. And some parts of my house are 46, 47 degrees. Other parts are 65 degrees, like around the door, the bottom of the door, and the sides of the door. And I had just had double pane windows installed in my house, and they were the same temperature as the outside, but guess what? The edge along the windows, there was heat coming out of them. Because when they'd installed the windows, they didn't insulate around the windows. Normally what they would do when they put windows in, they plumb them in, and there's going to be about 1 inch space on both sides. Mm-hmm. Right. And they just put molding over the top of that. They don't insulate. So I'm writing this down. And by the time I got done, I was astounded how many heat leaks under the garage door. My garage is connected to the house. And obviously, there's leaks from the door going into the garage, so it's leaking out underneath the garage door the seal. So that's something that I had to replace, a garage door seal. And the sweeps on all of my doors underneath had to be replaced. So when you buy a brand new door, they have a little sweep underneath there that's like a seal. It's installed at the factory. Those wear out. You've got to put new ones on. I never even thought of this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So the windows, the doors, and a lot of the siding wasn't firmly pressed down against the lower siding, and there was actually heat coming out. I mean, if you look at a house that's normal, you got the 2x4 studs, okay, and then you have on one side you have the siding, on the other side you have the sheetrock, and in between you might have some fiberglass insulation. That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if anything's leaking on the outside, if the air's coming on the outside into that area, it's going to be coming out of that area into all these different places, like your light sockets, the receptacle boxes, all along the bottom of your house, those things you plug your lamp into.
Yeah, a lot of them are cold.
I could not. It was astounding. I take the plate off, and I'm getting 40 degrees when I put my laser in there and test it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, this is inside. This is crazy. So all of the things you need are at Home Depot or Lowe's. Now, I had double pane windows, but when I went to pistol smithing school in Denver, and that house, it was built about 1910, and it had this simple, believe it or not, it was lead glass in the windows. Mm-hmm. And I simply got plastic sheeting, stapled it around the outside, and that gave it a dead air space between the sheeting and the window, and that stopped all insulation leak, all heat leak, all cold coming in, heat going out. And you can buy those kits now. In fact, they're modern now. You buy these kits for the window, and it has tack strips with it, and it's a plastic sheet. You put it up on the outside, and you tack it down all the way around, and then you take a hairdryer and you lightly heat it up, and it shrinks as tight as if it's a piece of glass. And it doesn't look that bad, and it can be taken down once construction starts. So there are different things to do throughout your house, and you can extrapolate this data onto anything, whether it's a house, a condominium, a cabin, even to a degree your camper, motorhome, trailer.
Mm-hmm. Kurt Wilson's with us. ArmchairSurvivalist.com. And Kurt, I've got a question for you. I want to share a thought about what I'd like to do in our great room. We have a room that has a lot of glass on it, and we don't need that much glass. And I'd like to save some of the muscle power that we use cutting and stacking and storing wood. We'll be right back. Kurt Wilson's with us, ArmchairSurvivalist.com. So, Kurt, I looked up that Centec non-contact pocket thermometer that you're talking about, the size of a key fob. It's great. It's about $10. I see one on eBay, free shipping, $13.50. And I found the one that I used. We have one here, and we've mentioned it on the air. Mine is more like a pistol grip, and that's available for around $10 to $20 as well, and you can get that at Harbor Freight. So what I did was I did the same thing that you did. I walked around in the summer as well as the winter, and I aimed that non-contact thermometer at the garage doors, and they face west. And in the afternoon, the garage doors were well over 100 degrees, well over 100, like 120, 130 degrees. I aimed at the roof, well over 130 degrees, maybe 138, 148. And we don't have a black roof. We've got kind of a wood bark colored roof. And so I was aiming it at we have a stone house, kind of a gray colored stone. I aimed it at the stone. I aimed it at a tractor tire I had parked in the sun, and that was over 130 degrees. So I became really aware of color and temperature and how much heat was in the areas of the outside of our house. And then I went inside and I aimed that thermometer to see if we had heat leaks, and see if the heat was coming in during the summer, for which we'd have to use energy to cool those heat leaks, meaning air conditioning. And in the wintertime, I use that same non-contact thermometer. It has a little laser pointer, and you kind of has a pistol grip, and you aim it at the roof or wherever you're trying to determine where you have temperature changes. And here's what I found. It's really simple. You can do this without any money at all. When it snows, or you have a light dusting of snow, you look at the roofs and you look at the neighbors' roofs and you look at where the snow's melting. And if their roof is melting faster than yours, they've got poorer insulation than you have, generally speaking. They've got heat leaks. And so the heat's leaking up through the attic and melting the snow on the roof. So what you can do in your house is look at where the snow is melting first. And that's where the heat is leaking out.
I forgot to mention one thing when I was doing the testing. I have a fireplace. I have 2 fireplaces in my house. And where the chimney meets the roof, heat was coming out right there. So we just had a new roof put on. So when they did this, I told them I wanted special flashing. And it goes up 8 inches on one side and comes under the roof 8 inches on the other side. And all the way around the chimney and every other vent on my roof. And the guy's like, you know something, don't you? He said, does it leak there? I said, just heat. It leaks heat and cold comes through there. I can see it. So he laughed. He goes, you're one of few people who even know what this flashing's for.
Yeah. So you can learn a lot, and you can do some research before you have these jobs like roofing done. Another thing you might want to check on is the color. Now, I called the manufacturers of some roofing products, shingle companies, and I asked them, where do I find the ratings about absorption of heat, based on color? They said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, okay, so black absorbs heat the most, white absorbs heat the least, green is somewhere in the middle. Where is that? Where is that chart? I can't find it. And they said, we don't have one. And I said, why? And they said, well, we were advised not to because of the lawyers. Now, isn't that ridiculous? So, if you live in Florida, you probably want a roof that you certainly don't want a black roof in Florida. That's it'd be unbearable. And maybe in your neck of the woods where it's a little colder, you might want a darker colored roof. So it'd be nice to be able to make that decision rather than style. What style, what color roof would look nice. How about working with nature instead of fighting nature?
Well, you can do that.
That's what we're all about.
You can find out heat refraction index on colors, and it's a typical physics problem, and you can find the answer on the internet on that. But I had mine when I had mine put up. I used a green, and you're right about the you can look around and see the different roofs and how long the snow sets and where does it evaporate first and where does it dry out first. Now, we got an inch of snow last night, and every house that I'm looking at has hot spots on it and snow melted in some parts. My house is a complete sheet of snow on my roof, and it's not melted at all.
And they're probably looking at you thinking, boy, that poor guy's freezing in there. Look at his roof. We'll be right back. Kurt Wilson. Kurt Wilson's with us. Kurt, I was thinking back during the break about what you did with that blow-in insulation. And I think there's a really important point that needs to be underscored and emphasized, and a couple exclamation points put on it. And that is, you found an opportunity. Number one, you were not shy about going to a yard sale. Number two, and there's no reason to be shy about going to a yard sale. The person that's selling whatever it is that's being sold is really glad you're there, hoping that you're going to be spending some money, and that person will have the receipt of cash, and you're going to have lowered his inventory. That's what that guy's looking for. So you never know what you're going to find. And so, number one, you were certainly willing to do that, and that's a point that we should make, that no one should be embarrassed or ashamed or afraid to go to a yard sale. Number two, you found something there that you thought you might be able to use, and price overcomes all objections. So at $50 for the insulation, well, it's nice to have, but not worth $50 in your mind. And then when the price came down, at one point you said, I'm going to do it, and you jumped on it. Now, that's another point. So price overcomes all objections. The next thing that I'd like to put an exclamation point is that you decided that you were going to tackle this job. You were going to use that insulation that you bought. You were going to figure out how to get the equipment at what I believe would be the lowest cost, which would be try to rent it. And you were going to do that and save some money in the long run by blowing in this insulation. So you took it upon yourself to do that job and to make the result happen. So kudos to you for doing that. And class, you can all do the same thing. Now, of course, when you handle insulation, you're going to want to wear a respirator, and you're going to want to wear eye protection. You want to wear, long sleeve shirt and gloves, and tuck your socks into your pants. I mean, that's what you're going to want to do. But yeah, you can do it.
Well, and you bring up a good point. And the thing is, and this is what survivalism is. It has nothing to do with crawling on your belly in the woods with a gun and living off dirt. It has to do with your ability and willingness, those two words. Your ability and willingness to perform tasks that heretofore have been unachievable for most people, or even for you. You look at something, you say, this is something that needs to be fixed. I'm going to do it. And then you actually do. In reality, there's no such thing as failure, because perseverance overcomes failure of any kind.
I have an old Mercedes that has been in our family for years. It was my mother's. It's an ML320. It's a little SUV, 6-cylinder V6, all-wheel drive. And the reason we had it is my dad was in a car accident, and it was very difficult to get him in and out of most vehicles. But the front doors on this ML320 open 90 degrees. So it's a great vehicle, all-wheel drive, very, very well built. But after a couple 100,000 miles, the transfer case failed. I had the opportunity to, take it, bring it to a shop, $1,500, $2,000 to have it fixed. So I looked around. I found on the internet a used transfer case with lower miles. So I bought it. It arrived a couple of days ago, and right after the broadcast, I'm going to take the old one out. Our son and I are going to take the old one out and put the new one in. Have I done that before on a Mercedes? No. But am I going to do it? Absolutely. So for $185, I believe, plus some ATF, some Dexron 3 transmission fluid that's going to take 2 quarts of, I'm going to have this vehicle up and running again. So I could either say, well, it's junk, or I could part it out, or I could look at it, rusting in the driveway, or for $185, I could put it back into service. And that's what I decided to do. So the point is, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't do it.
And that's the key. You have so many people nowadays that when they look at a task of anything, it could be searching for something on the internet, to insulating your house, to putting molding back down that had come up, to handling the cabinets in your kitchen that they used to be dark walnut, now they're all weird colors, and you don't know what to do. And they instantly in their mind say, I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to fail. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. They instantly consider themselves a failure, and they think that's okay.
Now, there's some things that you can do that are proactive, and let me share one of those with you. When we built our house, I decided to raise the garage ceiling to about 12 feet. And the reason was I wanted to put an automotive lift inside the garage, and it's there. And I decided that I would buy one and I would install it myself. I had never installed one of these lifts before, but I planned the garage floor, and I put the concrete and the rebar, extra heavy rebar, every 12 inches under where the lift pads were, a foot thick concrete there. It only requires 4 inches, but I wanted to make sure that, the lift didn't fall down and kill somebody. Well, when I was putting it in, I was looking at the garage door. It's a 9-foot by 9-foot garage door. I was looking at it, and I thought, someday I'm going to need to do an axle and remove an axle from a vehicle. So I better shift the lift several inches to the left from center of the garage door. So I did that. And I was teaching one of our instructors how to replace a rear axle bearing on his old truck, his 1977, I think his truck was. And I stopped and I looked at him and I said, you know why the lift is off center? because I knew I was going to be putting an axle in someday, but I didn't know it was going to be yours.
That's smart. That's thinking ahead. That's thinking, people don't, I don't know. I see this all the time. And we have a store in Hayden, Idaho, and I have people come in all the time and they ask questions of how to do something. I used to have this on my show. I say, okay, now it's time to stump the survivalist, where they'd call in and try and ask me a question that would stump me. And in 10 years, nobody ever did. And it's not because I'm the smartest cookie in the box. It's just that I have the ability to evaluate similarities, differences, and to extrapolate the data I already have into the future. You just mentioned axle, and I'm driving. I have a 1956 Chevy station wagon. I'm driving it in Oregon, in nowhere, Oregon. And I come to a stop alongside the road, and I go to take off again, and all that happens is I hear a whirring sound and crunching. I broke an axle. I just out of nowhere, it just snapped. So most people would say, well, I got AAA maybe, and I'll call them and have them tow me to a gas station or to a repair place, and it'll cost me about $500 to have it fixed. When I just evaluated exactly what had happened, there was a junkyard 2 miles down the road. I went down there, bought an axle, hitchhiked back, and alongside the road, I replaced that axle. And, you got to take apart the rear end, take the gear off, the clip off, jack the vehicle up, pull the axle totally out one side, which is that's what you had to do, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
And I did this alongside the road. Nowadays,
that's an accomplishment. That's an accomplishment.
Well, yeah, I didn't look at it like that. It's just like it had to be done. Period. Mm-hmm. I don't have money. I was lucky to spend the $20 for the axle. Nowadays, that happens, and people are just, oh my God, I'm going to junk the car.
Mm-hmm. I was talking with Mike Parsons. He's one of our instructors. He's very clever as well. And he had a failure in his car, and it was an older vehicle, and he didn't have a lot of money with him, I believe, at the time. So he drove down the road, and he found a car like the one he had, same kind of engine, in somebody's yard, and it was, not running. And I believe he had a water pump problem. He needed a water pump. So he asked the guy if he could buy the water pump. And he got the water pump, put it in his vehicle, and off he went. I mean, that is not, that's not typical thinking. And as you said, we got to call somebody. Why? And what if there's nobody to call? And that's the point of your broadcast and our broadcast. You don't have to call somebody. You can do it yourself. And there's plenty of YouTube videos on whatever you're trying to do. And I use them too. I mean, I don't know all the answers. And a lot of times I'll go, even if I do know the answer, I'll say to our son, I'll tell you what, let's take 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Let's go to YouTube. Let's see how other people do it. Because maybe they've got a better idea. Maybe they've got a better workaround. Maybe it'll be lighter, easier, and faster. Let's invest 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I told you about, yard sales and everything else. Let's pretend, and when people ask me, well, how do I prepare? What do I store? What do I do? And I said, let's pretend that there's no store or service facilities for 1 year. Just start with a year. That's all. Everything that you think you might need in a year, well, that's what you should start with. I'm looking right now at 3 shelves of Chilton auto manuals that date back to 1946.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. And then I have a whole shelf of the modern Haynes automotive manuals. Mm-hmm. But I can name a vehicle. I've got a repair manual for it. Mm-hmm. That's what I buy at yard sales also.
I've got some of those Chilton manuals and Haynes manuals as well. I've got some in the studio. And we have a couple old Porsches, 928. We have one that was owned by H. Ross Perot. Oh. And so I bought that. Yeah, it's a 1979 Porsche 928 V8 all aluminum engine, aluminum cylinders. Believe it or not, it's a brilliantly engineered vehicle. It's very sophisticated, very problematic. But so I have the manuals for that in the studio, and I'm looking at them. It takes the I would say they're 15 volumes, 15 notebook volumes.
Oh my God! Oh, can you use another motor for that? My brother has.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we have 3 of them left. We had 4, sold 1. We have 3 of them left. And boy, Mrs. Finelli is on my case. What are you going to do with them?
Well, that's the thing. My brother is the NRA rep for the state of Nevada, and he has a piece of property that he stacks stuff on. This is what I call it. He has a 1941 Chevy 4-door sedan. He's got a 42 Ford delivery truck. He has he had 3 Porsches. He has 1920 Humboldt, but he has a brand new on the pallet Porsche 928 motor.
Wow.
And
there's
why he has it is because he got it cheap, and that's it. He doesn't have a Porsche that he can put in.
Well, if I need one, I know where to go. We'll be right back. Boy, this hour's going fast. It really is. Kurt Wilson, armchairsurvivalist.com. Kurt Wilson's with us. Kurt, you're on the radio on Sundays, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. What are you going to be talking about? Can you give us a thumbnail of this Sunday's broadcast?
I haven't a clue. I can tell everybody this, but it's only 2 hours, and that's a misnomer. It's only 2 hours. The first hour, you'll get more news from me than you will get from any professional radio host in the world in a whole week. That's how much research I do every week. So I'm 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm researching my show for the next Sunday. And the second hour, I like to have something that's going to help people survive a little bit better. I've had shows, especially on insulation. It has shows on insulation, show how to silence a generator, how to clean your guns. Believe it or not, I was a master gunsmith for 25 years, and I made so much money cleaning people's guns that they stopped working because they crudded up. How to refinish wood, how to refinish your gun stocks, how to plant, how to harvest, how to preserve food for long-term storage. I mean, you name it. Every single particle of your life is something that I can help you work and perform in a more optimum manner.
Okay.
It's like, okay, let me give you an idea. Anybody can sleep in a gutter. You're right, you're tired, fall down in the gutter, you go to sleep. I would rather sleep in a more optimum manner, in a bed. So it's, it's the same thing. And I teach people how to work on their cars.
Tell me about how do you silence a generator? Because I had that situation, and let's compare notes. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, there's a couple things that you can do. You have your exhaust, okay? And usually it's just a little square box that goes onto the exhaust port, and that's your exhaust, and that's where about 75% of the sound comes from. Right. So what you do is you pull that off, and sometimes you can find actual exhaust flanges that'll fit right onto that. Sure. Okay, and then you would take and you would bring out a pipe, an exhaust pipe, muffler pipe, stainless or even iron if you want to, at least 1.5 inches, preferably 2 inches in diameter, and you will figure out the angle to this yourself, depending on where you're going to put your generator. But this will come out about 2 feet and then 90 degrees up into a motorcycle muffler. Okay? Okay. And then bring the pipe up higher, as high as you want. Now, some people have done this without even a muffler. And just the distance of the pipe that they come out will quiet it down some. So, and I've had other people say, no, I just use a car muffler I found in a junkyard and I run the pipe through that. Another way is, this is the way that they used to do in the when I was on the reservation, is the generator, you have the flange that comes out, it goes down into a pit that they buried a 50-gallon drum with the hole cut out on top. Right. And they filled that drum with rock, not small rock, but fist-sized rocks. And that pipe goes down into that. Now, they have a cover over the top of that so it won't fill up when it rains. That pretty much deadens the sound. The reason, the whole concept behind deadening the sound of a generator is so that people don't know you have it, so they won't come and steal it, or so they won't think that you have other things that they want to steal.
Sure.
And then again, you can always build a housing for it. And we've done this too. You don't want to buy any of these cheap plastic sheds, but you would build, say you got a 10,000 kilowatt generator, and you want to keep it as quiet as possible and out of sight. So you build a box around it, and you insulate the box with non-flammable materials, and you have it as a little shed. You're building a shed is what you're doing, and you have two openings. You have opening about a foot on one side and a foot on the other, and you put thermostatically controlled fans on those, like you have for your radiator. Some like electric radiator. On one side, it pulls cold air in. On the other side, it exhausts cold air and the exhaust of the generator.
Yeah. Well, we're right in sync. What I did was I have a generator, 5,000 watt, 5 kW generator, box around it, metal box around it, inside a wooden frame building, and I used an automotive exhaust, fabricated that, and it goes up and out near the just under the roof. Can hardly hear it. I mean, literally can hardly hear it. Kurt Wilson, thank you so much for being with us, spending your time today. ArmchairSurvivalist.com.